All right, we got like 20 people in here. We can go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for coming today to the Team Science Crash Course. This is essentially it's put on by the Georgia CTSA. And just to give you a high level overview of what we're going to be covering today, um, it's a starting point. So what we're going to do is provide a grounding of some team science concepts, some examples of applications, and then following the session, if you'd like, provide you some guidance and feedback during some consulting sessions if you want to uh, take on um, that opportunity. So what we're going to be talking about is foundational knowledge to explore the team sciences, understanding how you can use team science language within your teams, and introduce you to some resources that you can leverage in your teams. So about me and why I am doing this team science course. So I graduated from the University of Central Florida with my PhD in industrial organizational psychology, which is taking psychological principles and applying them to the workplace. And throughout my time, whether it is um, uh, when I was at a postdoc at Purdue slash UPenn and now associate professor at Georgia Tech, the things that I study have to do with um, teams. So I study everything from human robot teams, astronaut teams, military teams, and as well as science teams. In case you missed it, there's a recent National Academies report on the science of team science and how we can apply these principles to our scientific teams. And I was part of that consensus report. So this is kind of uh, one of my main research and application domains, and that's why I'm giving you a presentation on it today. So again, this perfect brief this the purpose of this workshop is just to give you a brief introduction into team science. So we'll explore a little bit of how teams work and how to understand teams. And this will be a future advanced organizer for future workshops. And we're still trying to get we usually do some specific ones on leadership and team communication, and we're trying to broaden our horizons, which means finding new people to do these workshops. So it's taken a little bit of time. So we'll have those listed out and communicated to you as soon as we get some facilitators to agree. All right, agenda. Basic teamwork concepts, a way to understand teams and teamwork. We're going to talk about two input factors, so things that influence how your team performs. One will be team formation, so thinking about who's on your team, and the other will be leadership. Then we'll also talk about mediators. So, all teams face some of these challenges related to conflict. How do you manage, leverage, and mitigate that conflict when it arises? And lastly, today we'll be talking about how you may or how you can promote psychological safety on your teams as well. So before we really get into it, one caveat: this is a little bit of an interactive. It's not like extremely interactive session, so you'll be breaking into small groups through breakout rooms. So if you're a little bit hesitant on that, um, just wanted to preempt that before we continue on with the session. I hate it when people go into the breakout rooms and they're paired with someone who's like not actively at their computer. So just want to say that before we really dig into things. So one thing that I want to convey from the get-go is that science is a team sport. Now we've shifted from this perspective of a lone genius uh, uh, creating or engaging or finding scientific discoveries to more of a collective effort. The scientific problems that we're facing today are more complex, and they're usually more too complex for one person to solve. And oftentimes, this involves interdisciplinary collaboration, working with folks from a variety of different perspectives, across psychology, engineering, biology, computer science, and beyond. The scales of the projects have also increased. So there's a lot of global challenges that need to be tackled, requiring coordination between multiple different teams across geographically distributed areas. The tools that we use to conduct science, both from actual task work, I mean, like what you would be working with on a day-to-day basis, as well as the way that you collaborate with one another through things like Zoom or Teams or whatever software your university has purchased a license to. That has also become more and more complex. And um, some examples of these huge scientific efforts are the Human Genome Project, the COVID-19 vaccines, the Large Hadron Collider, NASA missions, and interdisciplinary research centers. All of these involve usually a massive amount of individuals working on a shared scientific goal across both time, space, and disciplines. So it's really important to better understand how these teams can, well, work better together. Understanding how teams work is also important to you. If any of you are going up for tenure and promotion, most universities have some sort of interdisciplinary language and interdisciplinary impact in their tenure and promotion packet, or like in their policies. And most importantly, you will not get tenure or promotions alone. You'll be working with undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, and other colleagues as well. And importantly, we find that teams are generally more productive, more publications from engaging in teamwork, and more successful grant applications when you are working as a team. In fact, we found that interdisciplinary teams can even be more successful, both in terms of getting federal funding, but well, I mean, these stats were before this last year, as well as be more successful in getting funding, as well as the number of publications and citations that these publications receive. You're getting more money to support your research. You're getting your research out there more effectively, and the research, if you're using a citation index as representative of quality or impact, you're getting more citations or having more impact through that way by working in interdisciplinary teams. Also, we see this trend from funders to ask for more information about the collaborative efforts of your team. So, of course, the science is first in what you're proposing, but they want to make sure that folks are able to work together well. So you find some FOAs emphasizing interdisciplinary research and team science. We've seen these calls in NSF and NIH. These are particularly relevant and salient in calls for interdisciplinary institutes or centers. How are you all going to work together? How are you going to measure your effectiveness? How are you going to ensure that if there's any collaboration problems, that these problems are remedied? So often when individuals are applying for these larger centers or interdisciplinary institutes, they'll use language from the National Academy's team science reports or other resources within the science of team science discipline to support the efforts that they are doing. In fact, we also see a rise in professional organizations focused on understanding teamwork and science teams. Teamwork generally is the in group, which is the interdisciplinary network for group research. And then we also have Insights, which is the international network for the science of team science, which explicitly focuses on scientific teams and how do we improve teamwork in these scientific teams. So what I want to do real quick is see what folks think of when they think as a team. So on your device, just go to, actually, I should start presenting it. So, oop, present. All right. If you would go to menti.com and type in the code 27008102. And what I want to do is see just generally what people have in mind when they think, what is a team? So let me share that screen real quick. I don't know why I can't share the screen. Oh, there it is. All right, there we go. So again, it's menti.com and the code is 27008102. And just take a moment to type in there, what is a team? We already have some good responses coming in. We have a group with a common goal, a group of people working collaboratively towards a common goal, a group of people that work together to achieve a goal, a group of people. Okay, I think I see a trend here. A group with different skill sets. That's a good one. And experiences that come together to reach a common goal. A group to solve the given problem. A combined intelligence, shared purpose. A team is a group of people who have gathered together to achieve the agreed upon goals. Multiple people collaborating, working together. These are really good coming in. You all seem like you have a good idea of what a team is, a collection of focused, driven people working towards a goal or result, a group of people working towards the same goal. Different skill set. All right, we have that again, working towards a common goal with a variety of backgrounds as well. These are good. I like them a lot. I mean, I don't know what else I have to present on today. Seems like you all know what teams are already. From an academic standpoint, so you guys are really on point here. But from an academic standpoint, we add a little bit more to this definition. So a team is a set of two or more people who are dynamic, interdependent, and work adaptively towards a common goal. So a lot of folks got this the very bit at the beginning. You know, it's a group of people, two or more individuals working together, and this end part here, working together towards a common goal. Importantly, the work most often needs to be interdependent, so you are relying on one another. It's really hard to call like a group of assembly workers a team because they're not necessarily relying on one another to that great of an extent. It's a much easier job when the work that everyone is doing is interdependent. So you are relying extensively on one another. Some other important caveats here is that they operate within a multi-level context. So you can think of individuals who are nested in the teams, who are then nested in the organizations. And so characteristics of the individual are affecting how the team is operating, and characteristics of the organization is then having an influence on also on how that team is operating. So that's part of the how teams function, and they vary substantially on a number of characteristics and dimensions. This is just an example from one of the earlier National Academies report that I mentioned earlier. Teams can vary on diversity, on a variety of characteristics. Diversity can be captured on things like demographic diversity, gender diversity, functional background diversity. So, like, what is your academic discipline, for example? They can be unidisciplinary or they could be transdisciplinary. It can vary on size from small to mega. They could be co-located or globally distributed. Individuals on teams can have aligned goals or divergent and sometimes misaligned goals. And oftentimes we find that teams vary on their boundaries. So you can work with the same individuals across a period of years, or that can readily fluctuate over the course of minutes, as well as having low or high interdependence. Um, and so another way to think about how teams can differ is through their authority differentiation. So this is like differences in the hierarchical structure in the teams. So who's making decisions? So oftentimes in academia, we have a relatively strong in terms of formal hierarchy, where you have, maybe your undergrad students, your graduate students, your postdocs, your PIs, and then, the chairs of your department and so on and so forth. Though, like in actuality, sometimes labs can run at a pretty flat structure as well. The way that you structure your team in terms of authority differentiation can affect how well your team gets along and functions. Same thing with skill differentiation, right? You can have a team of experts that are that have their own functional background diversity. Think of your interdisciplinary teams here, or you can have a team of individuals who are essentially engaging in the same behaviors. Think of maybe your restaurant team. So you have a team of waiters, right? They all have the same sort of skill set that they are all applying to accomplish the goal of the team in that particular context. And so it can vary drastically on that as well. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but teams can vary on temporal stability. You can all come together for just a second and then break apart and never form again, or you could be together for the long term. And the reason why I'm mentioning these things is for you to think about in your own team, in your own life, what characteristics best represent your team. Um, so, one example of this, of why understanding these characteristics matter, is that they can affect expectations. For example, a one off project team, they'll have low temporal stability. So, they won't prioritize um, uh, investing in each other's interpersonal relationships, which may affect the development of emergent states. We'll talk about one of these a little bit later, like trust or psychological safety. People will just not care because you're just together for a short period of time and then you're off. So maybe that will also affect how you are communicating with one another. Teams of this sort may rely more so on like radical candor and be a little bit more insensitive in the way that they're communicating, because you do not necessarily need to preserve those interpersonal relationships for the work down the line. So it's like I was saying, this is important to know both as a team member as a leader. So it could affect how decisions are made. If you want your team to have low authority differentiation as like a PI of a lab versus a high authority differentiation. So is it like is everyone coming to a consensus, or are you just making all the decisions and telling how to run their uh, uh, what tasks they're doing? It also affects how much you rely on other teammates. So low skill differentiation, you might be expected to do everything, versus high skill differentiation. There are very clear roles and responsibilities for you to do as a team member. Now, it's also important to know as a leader. So many of these dimensions that we've talked about a little bit earlier are perceptual in nature. So how decisions are made, who's responsible for them. So it's up to the leader to ensure that teams have a clear and consistent expectations. So different rules for the same type of decision across time can create ambiguity, which leads to lack of trust, psychological safety, which could be a downfall for your team in the long run. So that's just a basic introduction, but now what I want to do now is maybe talk about um, how do teams work, or how I learned to love collaborating with other people. And so this framework here is really it's for you to kind of take away, to understand how your team operates, or how we understand how teams work, so you can focus maybe on things in which your team is lacking, or things in which you believe could be improved in your team. So at the one end, we have outcomes, right? These are what the team is striving for. Your academic research teams is focused on getting those publications, grant submissions, and hopefully the well-being of your team members. So what leads to these outcomes? Well, we capture those in what we call mediators, which can be separated into two, excuse me, buckets: processes and emergent states. Processes are things like communication, coordination, and conflict. These are the actual behaviors that folks are engaging in. Whereas emergent states are things that take time to develop. These are things that aren't necessarily directly observable. It's kind of like the vibe of a team. And these are characteristics like, or constructs like psychological safety, trust, and cohesion. You can't directly observe trust or psychological safety or cohesion, but people have these perceptions. And these perceptions are built upon the processes in which they engage in. Now, all of the behaviors and the emergent states that a team that's characteristic of a team come from inputs. Now, inputs can be a variety of things, but examples are the team composition: who's on the team, how big the team is. Sometimes it's a lot easier to have communication if the team is smaller than larger, and as well as the leadership on the team. So these inputs influence these mediators, which then lead to these outcomes. So this is just a framework for you to take away and understand how teams work. And today, what we're going to do first is focus on inputs, in particular team composition. So what we're going to do now is just a team formation task, and I can share the let me bring up chat real quick. Share a file in chat. So what we're going to do now is do a quick, actually, a quick, here we go. Crash course, team formation activity. There we go. A quick activity. So if everyone could download the Word file that I just shared with folks, what we're going to do is throw you into breakout groups of maybe 4 people. I'm looking at the numbers. And the general premise of this is that you're a new assistant professor in organizational psychology looking to form an interdisciplinary team to study the psychological, physiological, and cognitive effects of commuting on work and families, and the implications this holds for infrastructure design. So you've been given a list of candidates to choose from. And for this activity, I want you to do 2 things. For the first 10 minutes, I want you to read through the prompt on this Word document that was shared, and independently, don't talk to your team members yet. Select the individuals, the top 3 candidates that you'd like on your team. And then collectively, after the 10 minutes have passed, discuss: who did everyone pick? Why did they pick them? And come to a consensus on who you all would like on your team. Afterwards, After you've come to a consensus, then we're going to post those results on Menti in your groups while you're in your breakout rooms. It'd be great if you can come up with like a name or use your breakout room number or something so we can identify which group came up with which result. And so, what Gray's going to do now, hopefully, is send some folks into breakout rooms. And we'll have you independently um, sort people into positions and then, or your top three candidates, and then collectively come back. Actually, I guess while other folks are putting in their choices, let's start with group three. So for this project, do we have someone on group three who can talk about why they picked Gabrielle, Sasha, and Wayne for their team?
I think I was in the group. Uh,
Sure.
so hold on, let me open the Word file. So we selected Gabriel because it was related to commute, so transportation research is required. Sasha because same institute, so we know the quality of research. And the last sentence says that excellent team player. So and then it's cognitive psychology. So one of my group member in the suggested that will really help us. And Wayne, we selected Wayne because he expressed interest. Uh, Occupational medicine is not directly related, but I have my experience is that sometimes full professor they try to venture into other research areas which are very close to their area, and they have expressed interest. They also have experience in grant funding, and the way this selection was done is was based on assumption that assistant professor in organization psychology is will be investing his or her own startup fund to do this research. So there is expectation that that person will lead the project and not these other three team members. So that's how this was selected.
That's really good. There's a lot of different factors that you considered there, their background, whether or not they're a team player. Um, uh, I haven't heard that before. I've run this exercise a couple of times, but with selecting Wayne, I think that's a good assumption to make. We have an expert who has grant funding going into a new area of research, and so they were likely motivated. Or any, was there anything that anyone that you had to shut down or not select in your discussion?
So there was a discussion about Olivia Rose Malton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the profile looks really good. Uh, and I did not personally, I did not selected her because it says project lead, a strict project lead. So my experience says that if you're a strict project lead, you're not a good team member. So that was one of my reason. But otherwise, the profile is really good, and that is one of the person that we decided not to select.
That's a great reason. I like the way that you thought through that. Though I wonder if we can move to group seven, if we can get a representative from there and have you all highlight why you discussed or why you selected those three folks.
Sure, I'll be happy to talk if that's okay with my group members. Um, so we kind of first were thinking through like the different subject areas. So we knew we wanted somebody with like sort of the physiological medical perspective. We wanted somebody with the cognitive psychology perspective and like with the transportation engineering perspective. And we didn't need another organizational occupational person. Um, so that kind of gave us like three slots to fill. And then within each of those content areas, we were looking for someone who seemed like they would be a good collaborator, um, and then had some funding, some background having gotten funding. Um, we did pick Olivia. We kind of debated a little bit in our group about whether strict was a good or a bad trait. Um, my teammate Santi and I both said when we find out that, our kids at school have a teacher with a reputation for being strict, we're like, good, you need a strict teacher. We like that. Um, the description did say severely strict, so that may push it a little bit more in the not so good. But sometimes on a team, you need somebody to kind of like herd the cats a little bit and keep everybody in line. So we figured we'd give her a try.
Well, that's absolutely great reasoning too, and I think we're getting kind of closer to the point that I want for everyone to kind of take away there. We're not going to have time to go through everyone's selections here, but I love the idea as you're thinking about how these team members fit with not only your or with each other, but also their um, with your personal preferences and philosophy, and so we kind of already touched on this a bit, but these are different aspects in which these team members vary. Like, we didn't talk about this too much, but did you select only junior scholars or only senior scholars? Did you sacrifice potential attitudinal problems for pedigree? Did you think about how these team members would fit together with one another? Did you weigh personal information, like you knew the person a little bit more heavily and be biased a bit that way? And this exercise is not for you to come up with a single correct solution. It is more to think about um, things or what you value when you're selecting a team member. So, the three most important things to recognize oftentimes are personal biases will influence your decisions, to make sure to keep those in check. Diversity in terms of both academic background and lived experiences are important for you to consider when you're forming the team, specifically when it comes to fit on various different aspects. I mean, if you have a bunch of um, uh, Robin Williams and Flubber professors, you may need that strict person to come in and, as I believe Suni said, herd those cats together. One thing that I do want to mention here is that AI can help. I'll probably not do this link well, but what you can do oftentimes, if you're thinking about um, if you have a decision to make on who you want to be as part of your team, or weighing pros and cons, if you have like a grant application, is throwing it into a GPT, large language model, with maybe their CVs, what you prefer, and your personal experience. So you can, for right now, I just created a quick custom GPT with information about their backgrounds in here. So all of the same information that you had. Luckily, you had other team members to bounce ideas off of, but with a GPT, they can be your team member, or selection committee, or whatever you want to call it. So you can type in, who do you think I should select for my team? And then it'll use the information that I have presented to it and come up with explanations why. And it'll usually, when you're giving explanations, you can amend this. It's like, oh, I think these people are really senior. I'd rather not have them on my team. Could you suggest someone else? And so he can go back and forth with a GPT like this to better maybe select an individual for your team, or What I've used it for previously is also grant calls, for example. So you have your own profile, who you are as a researcher, and oftentimes there'll be like a call for applications. You upload the FOA and be like, hey, what areas specifically relate to me, and um, how can I leverage my expertise to apply for this grant. And so that's all I want to say on composition. I'm just trying to share my screen again. But the general idea is that, there's not one right solution, and then some of these new technological tools can help you select folks. So let's see, it's 105. There's a lot of different research on team composition and the variables that make a good team player. We have things like your personality, your extroversion, agreeableness, openness to experience. Speaking of experience, you have your job experience. People with longer tenures or with more experience are usually better for your team. Size is another thing. We've talked about that and how that can be thought of. Demographics are usually a proxy for your lived experiences, so gender, age, your ethnic background, and things like team orientation. You can get that through like the number of publications that they have with other folks. Some of the findings within this area show that homogeneity on some of these things are great, and heterogeneity are great for other things. So you kind of want all of your team members to be high on conscientiousness. This is always good for team performance, but you don't necessarily want them all high on extroversion or agreeableness. You don't want everyone agreeing with everyone all the time. That can lead to a lack of critical thought about what you are doing. You also don't want a whole bunch of extroverted people on the team. Extroversion is strongly related to things like leadership, and so you can't all be leaders on your team. So having a variety or a variability on some of these facets are better than others. And so you as a researcher, you don't have access to like personality inventories necessarily that we have that we use to conduct these studies. And even if you did, you probably don't want to be like, yeah, I'm considering you to be part of this grant application or part of this new collaborative project. Could you please fill out this 60-item personality inventory so I can understand who you are as a person before selecting you as a team member? That usually doesn't come across relatively well. You can infer a lot of this information though through what's on their CV. So clearly some of the sort of background features that we talked about earlier, their education, tenure, and their previous positions gives you a good idea of what sort of experiences folks have. Previous productivity, are they publishing? Have they published recently? Team orientation, who are they publishing with? Are they publishing with a lot of different individuals? Do they only have like one or two close collaborators? As well as their diversity in their roles in the publication. So this traditionally has just been authorship order, but a lot of times now journal publications are requiring authors to provide specific activities that the authors did on publications. And so you can look up that information if you want to know how team-oriented they are. You can also have interviews. This is a lot easier if you're interviewing graduate students or postdocs to be part of your team. These are great indirect indicators of personality, their team orientation as well as their lived experiences. But you can also just have a chat with a researcher and get some of this information from like a colleague to as a more indirect indicator of some of these variables. Again, more so with graduate students and postdocs, you can ask for Writing samples or project management scenarios. I give interview questions like this all the time when I am interviewing grad students to come into my lab. When you are interviewing folks, you want to make sure to do a structured interview procedure. All that is making sure that you're asking the same questions to each candidate. There's a what we find in the literature is that structured interviews are much better at predicting future performance than unstructured interviews. But one interesting finding is that when you ask managers which ones they believe are most effective, 80% of them will say structured interviews are more effective, while 20%, or at least honest with themselves, and say that unstructured interviews are more effective. They feel like those 20% feel like, yeah, that's totally more effective. But when they are asked which ones they use, 80% say unstructured interviews, meaning that even though that they know the data supports that structured interviews work better, they are more likely to think they are special and that unstructured interviews are actually better. So they rely on their judgment, which is, based upon the data, is not true at all. So oops, that's supposed to go. I don't know why that moved. All right. What another tip for interviewing folks is having targeted questions. When you ask them targeted questions, it should be on the characteristics that you most value. For me, I always consider when I'm selecting graduate students or postdocs, what am I missing? What does the grant or whatever project I'm working on require? And what is my team or lab lacking right now? That the students and your colleagues all have skills, strengths, and weaknesses. What I often do is kind of take do a little bit of introspection on what the makeup of my current team is, and see if I'm missing anyone. For example, during this last round, I have some great students who are super wonderful at writing and not super great at data analysis. So I'm looking at my incoming graduate students. I'm selecting someone who has a lot of experience and more experience with data analysis and interest in that, so they can fit the missing piece in my lab. And so it's always important to have those targeted questions. You don't necessarily need to use the same questions across different hiring procedures, but if you are within a particular pool when you're hiring within a particular position, it's important to use the same questions. So a little summary here before we jump on to the next topic. It's not always selecting the best individual team member. It does not consider whether or not team members get along with one another. Interpersonal dynamics is what drives success. So whenever you're building a team, if you have the opportunity, I know sometimes you don't, but if you are, ask who's the best scholar or individual for this team. Diversity is crucial. Homogeneity is only beneficial in some characteristics like conscientiousness and intelligence. But on other characteristics like agreeableness, can lead to derivative ideas and adherence to the status quo. There are many different types of diversity, and all of them have benefits. Lastly, we didn't talk about this too much, but I think it's important to keep your team relatively small if your goal is to have more innovation in your ideas. It also gives you a better opportunity to pivot if something or a pathway doesn't work out. And leading a large team can get extremely unwieldy. But next we'll be talking about, for the next couple of minutes, leadership. So the reason why we talk about this in this crash course is because we don't get, as academics, we don't get leadership training. We're asked to run labs or run projects or run teams without any particular training or mentoring on how to be a leader. Usually we find, or the research shows that when you talk to folks who PIs who are leading teams, they adopt the style of leadership that their mentor had. And sometimes that's not necessarily the right style for you. So it's critical that we mentor individuals not only from a research perspective but also from a leadership perspective. So providing our students and our colleagues the opportunities to exhibit leadership and providing them developmental feedback on how to be a leader. So what I want to do real quick is go back to Menti, and I'll share that again. Present. Okay. And just have a second or two to go back onto Menti, use the code again, and let me bring it up, and tell me what you think is a good leader. What are characteristics of a good leader? My screen sharing is still paused. Why does it say that? Let's try that one more time. I bet just because of this. All right. There we go. All right. So what makes a good leader? Let's just have some folks join and write some stuff down. Listens, thinks, delegates, responsible, best performing team member, kind, open-minded, curious, compassion, caring. Love the dreams and empathy. Flexible, empathetic, again, great, trusting, has integrity, communicative, decisive and empathetic, articulates team values and goals. It has an inclusive nature and a clear voice, kindness, someone who is an enabler. That's great. Recognizes people's goals and skill sets and utilizes them effectively for mutual wins. Someone who can decide, guide, support, teach, trust, and inspire their team. That's great. Good characteristic is having a big picture person. Oftentimes that is absolutely true. Anything else coming in? A good leader inspires, sets directions, helps others see the bigger picture. Good conflict management skills. That's great. It's a good advanced organizer for what we're going to be talking about in just a minute as well. So these are all good examples of what makes a good leader. And share my screen again. Boom, boom, boom. And one of the things I want folks to take away, and I think that was pretty clear to me in some of the responses, is that we're not necessarily talking about a single individual here. Leadership can come from multiple individuals, and there's lots of different good theories out there, and some of which represent the characteristics that you talked about. So there's like transformational leadership theory, which talks about having ideal influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. So here are some of the empathetic with individualized consideration. The empathy would fall under this bucket. Inspirational motivation is some of the big picture comments that you had. Knowing who your team member is and providing specific sort of guidance to them is intellectual stimulation. We also have, just having good relationships with your followers. So that's what leader membership exchange gets to here. Laser pointer gets to here. And we also, and I think this is where we're going to focus some of our attention for the next little bit, is collective leadership. This focuses on leadership roles, what the team needs, and it doesn't fall into one specific person. So when you're talking about leadership on your team, I think it's critical to kind of break away from the old habit of thinking that all of these characteristics reside in one single person. They can reside in multiple people. So focus on the leadership, which is the action or the behavior that folks are engaging in, rather than assuming that all of these things are going to fall within one person. So one of the collective leadership theory gets at has 4 different roles. And I think that's where we're going to focus for the next minute or two. These 4 different roles are, navigator, who establishes a clear, establishing and maintaining clear purpose and direction. An engineer is providing structure for the group and tasks to get things done. A social integrator is, the empathy part that we saw earlier, maintaining the healthy, productive relationships on the team. And then a liaison is someone who reaches out. We didn't see much of this in your responses, but someone who reaches out and helps develop and maintain productive relationships with external stakeholders. And it's really hard for someone to wear all of these hats. It really takes a team of individuals to wear these hats. Importantly, and I think something for you to take away here is that these roles can change over time. So depending on where your team is at and what your goals are, someone may move from being the navigator to the social integrator, the liaison to the engineer. And so this right here, this collective leadership theory gets at that idea. So team members are sharing leadership responsibilities, and enactment of these roles may differ across time. So for example, Janet often serves as the social integrator of the team, but has recently experienced a loss in a family. So she might not be up to engaging, in those activities. So someone will need to take over for that. Here's another one. While Steve is often the navigator, there's a decision needing to be made about medical device protocols, an area which is outside Steve's expertise. And you don't want them taking the lead role on that. And so there are various different examples of how this role can shift, or your roles can shift over time. It's important to recognize both as if you're a formal leader on a team or as a team member, that your role may change over time. I think what you should do if you are a formal hierarchical leader, so if you're a PI of a lab, is this acronym CARE. So one is being cognizant of the role that your team needs at this particular moment, being aware of the leadership needs of each team member, being ready to step back and allow your team to lead themselves, and then to expect to take action that may fall outside of your defined leader responsibilities. So in my head, I always say this to my students in my leadership classes. I think a leader is someone who just gets things done, and those things can fall within your traditional job description as a leader, but it can also be, getting your boots on the ground and doing data analysis, or, running a participant or something. A leader is someone who gets that done if it's necessary to get done. So by doing this, your team should engage in effective team processes and develop those emergent states. Remember from our earlier discussion about how to frame this, leader and leadership is an input to these processes and emergent states. We do have a break in here, but I think we're running just a tad behind. So I do want to just move us on to start talking about the middle bucket here, the processes and emergent states. In particular, since someone mentioned it earlier, I think it's great that we're going to be talking about team conflict. So why does conflict emerge? Well, oftentimes you have individuals coming from different thought worlds. So folks have different perspectives and experiences. There's also perceptual gaps. So differences in understanding a problem. You're not looking at the problem through the same eyes. And when you begin to integrate these cognitions and your affective reactions, that could be problematic. This is a better visualization of that. So you have two different people and you have a problem space that they are trying to address, whether it is like a research problem, a conflict within their approach to how to conduct research, or something, or who to select for their team, even. And again, these sort of background information influences the way that they see the problem. And so their understandings, expectations, and assessments are all can be different based upon who they are and where they come from. And when they begin to try and integrate these different understandings or expectations or assessments, that could lead to conflict. Now, this could be as simple as trying to integrate jargon with one another. So, your discipline may have a very specific term, and that term has a very specific meaning, or that may not necessarily be true with a collaborator who's not coming from that perspective. They'll use that term willy-nilly. And I'm sure that I've done that probably within this conversation that we're having today. And there's different ways of reasoning. For example, I may, as a psychologist, put a person first when working with a collaborator from mechanical engineering, while an individual from mechanical engineering may be putting a technology first, or an engineering problem first in the way that they're reasoning about things. So when you are actually trying to address these differences in perspectives, you're going through these integration processes. And when depending on the differences between the cognitive integration and the affective integration, may create some sort of conflict within your team. Now, conflict is often given a bad rep because it can have some positive effects. It can facilitate new ideas and creativity. It avoids groupthink. So if everyone's agreeing with everyone all the time and not engaging and not bringing different perspectives to the table, you may not ever grow. You may be agreeing arbitrarily and adhering to the status quo. So conflict helps break that. It helps identify problems. Anytime that a problem is brought up within a team, if something's not working well, that's inherently it's something that will create conflict on the team. You can be more thorough through exploring ideas and seeing the positives and negatives behind those ideas. And generally, when handled well, it can increase productivity. Now, but there's no doubt there are negative effects. Oftentimes, when you have conflict on the team, it detracts from how well people are getting along, how happy they are with one another, increases your stress, and can reduce productivity. So how do we get to these positive effects rather than these negative effects? One thing to recognize is it depends on the type of conflict. Work-related conflict can be leveraged depending on the expression, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Work-related conflict can be leveraged to have some positive outcomes. Now, work-related conflict can fall into two buckets: is task-related conflict. So this is differences in ideas, perspectives, and viewpoints regarding the work itself, as well as process conflict, which is different ideas about how the work should be distributed, the orders in which tasks are completed. So it's not about how well folks are getting along with one another. It is, what work should be done and how that work should be done. In contrast, interpersonal conflict or relationship conflict, these are tensions that between team members that are more social in nature. And that type of conflict never, ever, no matter how it's handled, leads to positive outcomes. Yeah, that's what that says. So For the task conflict, it depends on how the conflict is expressed. Now we have two different examples here of conflict, and we can go through it quickly. In version A, Mary tries to explain why she believes the allocation is adequate and even provides a bit of discretionary funds to the project. Tom listens but remains concerned. He suggests Mary may not understand the hidden costs in the situation and that they may want to discuss the issue further, and Mary disagrees. On the other hand, you have this version of the same underlying issue, but expressed in a different way. So Mary defends her reasoning and unequivocally states that the allocation is adequate and might even be more than is needed. But Tom interrupts her before she is finished. He asserts that Mary does not have the experience to see the hidden cost in the situation and demands that they reopen the issue. At the end of the day, Mary still disagrees. Can anyone have just a gander or a guess about what they see that's different here in the conflict expression?
The verbs are different.
Yeah.
In version A, the verbs are much calmer and more subtle, like tries to explain, provides, suggests, listens. And then in version B, they're a little more aggressive and strong, interrupts, defends, asserts. So version A just seems like a more calm, reasonable conversation, and version B sounds like people are getting kind of snippy.
Yeah, that's very much true. Do you think version A is there anything wrong with version A?
I mean, they're probably still gonna have to have some further conversation to get it resolved. It doesn't sound resolved, but it sounds like they're being like respectful and reasonable.
Yeah, for the most part, for sure. I think that some people in situations like this, in previous crash courses, identify, Mary may not understand the hidden. He suggests that Mary may not understand the hidden costs associated. So I can see that being, you could be expressing that a little bit differently as well. But it's definitely not as bad as he asserts that Mary does not have the expertise to see the hidden costs. And so that's exactly right. It's mainly how this conflict is expressed through the verbs that are in this um, example. So thank you for bringing that up. If we think about conflict expression, it can vary on two different dimensions. One's intensity and one is directness. Now, at the high end of both, so very intense and direct, we have an example that's very similar to what we saw in version B. It's clear disagreement, evokes defensiveness. This in turn leads to conflict spirals. So, escalating aggression, a bunch of negative information that is not necessarily useful to the conflict itself, as well as increased negative emotions. So this is certainly something that you want to avoid usually at all costs. You also have, when it's high on intensity, but not necessarily directness. So this is like you're dismissive, you're teasing, you're complaining about things. This doesn't necessarily lead to conflict spirals because it's hard to have a real strong back and forth when you're undermining someone, but it does lead to not good information being shared and still increased negative emotions. Disguise is kind of interesting because it usually only relates to one team member. So you are never able to address why there is potentially a conflict because it's not shared and it's not intense. It's not a lot of, so it can lead to negative things if the individual just holds on to what the conflict is about. And it may come out in different ways of their work not being as engaged and eventually lead to them leaving the team. What you usually want is a debate. So this is when it's low on intensiveness and high on directiveness. And so these are contentious points are clear and calmly presented. We saw a lot of that in version A. This will lead to a lack or a downturn into conflict spirals. More positive information being shared. If someone doesn't feel personally attacked, they're more likely to provide information in kind. More less negative emotions, which is good, as well as potentially, if it's handled right and you have some mature folks on your team, an increase in positive emotions. And so for some take-home strategies that you can use to get to this point, one thing in which there's a lot of research on are these collaboration agreements, welcome letters, or team charters. So this is a document that the team prepares before they start working together formally, and can revisit as they add and subtract team members. What it does is set clear expectations, establish how the team's going to work together, and it promotes trust. So who's on the team? What are we responsible for? Is there any information on things that will prevent them from working together at certain periods of time? For example, if you have kids and extracurricular activities, things like that will appear in this document. You don't have to give a reason. You can also just say, I'm not available at this time because I have other obligations. You can also have how conflict will be managed. So oftentimes, some of the frustrations that happen when there's conflict is that there's no set rules or guidelines for how it can be, it can come to the attention of people who may be resolving that conflict. So what you can do in these collaborative agreements, team charters, welcome letters, is have a set standard procedure for how the conflict is going to be expressed. And keep in mind, these are living documents that can change over time. And if you want, I do have examples of one that you can that I can send to the attendees. When conflict, you're not going to be able to capture everything, right? Like this is great to have this welcome letter, but it's not going to solve everything. But one of the important strategies as someone on the team is not to avoid the conflict when it occurs, or if it's witnessed, is to actually engage in that conflict. When it comes up, whether it's with you or with other folks, and you are the leader on the team and you witnessed it, you want to be sure to engage in that conflict. So try to engage, direct the conflict towards shared interests, and address the needs of both parties. This will likely acknowledge and address the needs of both parties. This will likely lead to a greater likelihood of agreement on some final solution. Don't get in a power competition. It's like, oh, I'm the leader, you need to listen to me. Or I've been on the team longer, so I have the expertise here. And don't make it personal by attacking the credentials of the individual or personality characteristics of the individuals. That will directly lead to relationship conflict. So you have a task conflict that you have a disagreement about, and if you start making it personal, that leads to relationship conflict, and nothing good comes out of that. As a leader, you want to be a role model, and there's a whole bunch of research on different conflict resolution styles that you can look into. But the last thing I want to mention relating to conflict is that it's important that you make sure that you resolve the conflict. Ensure that this particular conflict episode has been resolved by asking both parties. This could be both independently or collectively, whichever you feel is best for your team. You also want to see what gave rise to this conflict and how it could have been handled differently in the future. So having a game plan for if this is something that's going to be occurring regularly, how do you address that in the future? This can be difficult, but you also want to repair any interpersonal relationships that may have been damaged during this conflict to the point in which there's neutrality. You don't need folks to be all happy-go-lucky with each other all the time, but you can't have people really disliking folks on an interpersonal level working on your team. And then you want to release the conflict. So that conflict episode should not have any long-lasting interpersonal implications on the team. Sometimes folks, if there's a secondary conflict episode that occurs, folks will bring up the previous one and said, I did this for you. That has to live in the past. Otherwise, it's just going to make that secondary conflict worse. We have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to push through and talk about psychological safety and trust really quickly. So psychological safety is one of the best things that you can have on your team. And it's a shared belief that group members will not make fun of, ridicule, punish, or humiliate you for speaking up with your ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. What it really boils down to is that team members, including yourself, on your team feel comfortable with being vulnerable. It's not necessarily being nice to one another. It's not being like, oh, yes, I agree with you. I'm happy, go lucky, or complacent. Some people have not great ideas, and those ideas will be presented and given equal weight when you have psychological safety. Importantly, at the end of the day, the person who's presenting the idea will know why that idea was bad and not take it personally if you have a psychological safety. Again, it's when you are discussing these things, if there is a bad idea or good idea on the team, everything focuses on the discussion of that idea. It's also not trust. Trust is feeling safe knowing that someone can do their job, or that you can rely on them, or they can rely on you. It's not this comfortability with being interpersonally vulnerable. These are all the positive outcomes from the research showing what teams with high psychological safety do. They are more resilient, they learn more, they're more inventive, they have better performance. Also, the team feels a greater sense of belonging with one another. They feel like they are more respected, they feel like they have voice, and are generally happier. And all of this sort of roots down to how folks are communicating with one another. Now, communication's in this section, but it is a process. So, it is the behavior that folks engage in. So no matter what emergent state that we're talking about, communication is the key to effective teamwork and well-being. Now, understanding communication, it's important to recognize that, talking to each other is necessary, but not a sufficient condition. So the effective and ineffective teams don't really differ on the amount of communication. They differ on what they are saying. So an ineffective team will keep sharing shared information with one another, so information that everyone already knows, while effective teams will be sharing unique information. I know we've all been in meetings and such where, someone is adhering to the hour-long meeting that they scheduled and won't break it off. That's pretty ineffective meeting practice. It's just a example of this. So barriers to psychological safety, there's often, organizational department structure. Remember, teams exist within an organization. So if there's not a culture for being vulnerable or not being ridiculed, that can affect the degree to which your team is capable of developing psychological safety. Also, personal factors. If folks are more oriented to working with teams, then they're more likely to develop psychological safety. If folks are more confident, they're also more likely to develop psychological safety. You can give an individual with high and low self-efficacy confidence the same feedback, and they will interpret it differently based upon their confidence or self-efficacy. And so this kind of just gets into the negative side of things. So when there's a lack of psychological safety, team members are not going to be speaking up with their unique opinions or recommendations. They're less likely going to report their own or point out their own and other errors. They're less likely to discuss when they're interpersonally mistreated by others, and more likely to behave in a way that preserves the status quo. When this happens, teams don't learn. They're unhappy. They're not learning from their mistakes. They don't feel respected, and they don't feel like they're part of the team, which is not great. So what I want to do right now is just for the next 5 minutes, I want you to think about a time in which you didn't feel safe to speak up or take an interpersonal risk. So why did you feel that way? We're not going to go into breakout rooms. We're just going to do that here. Why did you feel that way? And then did your teammates know that you were feeling this way? And what actions could your teammates have taken to make you feel like you could take the interpersonal risk? So what could they have done? One example of this, is usually when you're in like grad school, or when you're when I was in grad school, I had an opportunity to disagree with. So when I was in grad school, our mentor took us out to dinner, and I thought we had a psychologically safe situation team, and we didn't. Our PI asked for feedback on how she was doing and how she could improve, and I thought I shared that with her in a professional way, and it did not come across. It was not interpreted well. So from that point on, I did not feel like I could share these sort of concerns with the PI of my lab, or with my fellow team members, because they didn't back me up when that was mentioned, and so that kind of detracted away from the psychological safety. But I'm rambling on because I want hopefully someone has thought of an occurrence in their life in which they felt like they didn't feel safe to speak up or take an impersonal risk.
So I don't mind sharing.
Thank you.
I have had previous work experiences where um, I was helping an organization put together a new program. And I think because the leadership staff was very short staffed. And I think with them dealing with the stressors of that and like administration, sometimes it can be taken out on people in other roles. So, getting like snippy comments and things like that, it makes you not feel like this is a psychologically safe environment. So then you hold back with like wanting to share suggestions or wanting to give feedback, because then you're worried about, okay, is this person going to snap at me? Are they, is it appropriate? It's not appropriate, but even though it's not appropriate, you start second guessing. So yeah, I've had situations like that, and like other coworkers are also like afraid to speak up. So it just created a very like an environment where you feel like you're walking on eggshells.
And do you think that, I mean, that's a terrible situation to be in, and hopefully you're out of it now.
Yeah.
Do you think your
Yeah.
okay, good. Do you think your teammates could have done anything to make you feel like you could have taken that interpersonal risk, or your PI or your leader in that
I think
example?
possible other administrative staff that witnessed it, they could have said something because they're on the same level, a same or higher level as the person in leadership that reacted that way. I think in those situations, it'd be helpful to have the support from administration.
Yeah, for sure. You need your team members to be able to back you up in some sense, especially in when the feeling unsafe and vulnerable is interpersonal too. So I appreciate you sharing and taking a stab at that. Thank you. I want to move us on just in respect of your time. But what you mentioned was something that folks can do to improve psychological safety on the team. So these are the four sort of takeaways here for you, which are having clear and transparent expectations. So by directional agreement on roles, recognizing why voices are needed. So if you have a variety of folks on your team from very junior to very senior, some folks may not understand why you have a junior folk on the team or someone from a different discipline. So acknowledging why those are needed and that you'll be working together. Be proactive in generating voice. Model curiosity. So if someone brings up an idea, let them ask questions rather than trash the idea immediately. Have them explore it to its fullest extent, but also be more empathetic when these ideas are approached. Think about where the other person is coming from. You can also lead by being vulnerable. I think this is the most impactful takeaway here. Acknowledge that that you can be fallible, and point out your own mistakes. That will make teammates more comfortable with expressing their own. And then follow through, walk the talk. If someone brings up a challenge or a concern, don't shoot the messenger. Allow all expressions of voice. So just a quick couple closing remarks here. With your graduate students and future graduate students, it'd be great if you interview prospective graduate students to make sure that they fit. This is leading back to the composition part. Use a team welcome letter or establish a team contract. Involve new members in revising the collaborative agreement regularly. Pay attention to the whole person. Build confidence by having early praise. It helps draw out the shy newcomers. Always ask how they are doing, not only how they're doing with the jobs that they are responsible for. Especially with new team members, it's important to meet regularly, evaluate and provide feedback through every term, and encourage the development of an individual development plan. So it's like, here's what you want to accomplish. Here's how we're going to accomplish that. That's really good to have for yourself as well as your graduate students or subordinates or postdocs that you work with. And we'll send out these slides and I'll have links to some of these tools. With postdocs, it's very much the same thing, but the plan to help with the next position actively, since postdoc terms are relatively short. So same tools here. But you're also note that your university may have particular resources for your postdocs. Now, this could be, you don't need to know everything about these resources, but just that they exist and to share them with your postdocs. And for yourself, it's always important to get a mentor, develop your own plan, as I mentioned earlier, and then reach out to folks. I think we can skip over this last part of how this fits with promotion and tenure. Just be sure that you review your tenure, promotion and tenure guidelines and look for language relevant to teamwork and collaboration. So just a quick recap. We went over some basic teamwork concepts. We dug in deep with team formation. We highlighted the collective leadership approach with leading your team. We talked a little bit about conflict management, and teams are going to conflict. So leverage how some of that conflict can be leveraged, how expression is important there. There's a lot of barriers to psychological safety, but a lot of benefits and how to overcome them. And we touched on things that you can do for your graduate students, your postdocs, and yourselves. Now, that's generally all. We have, 1 hour sessions, so not 2 hours, coming up in the near future, which will take a deeper dive on some of the particular topics that we went into. We also offer free consulting services, 1 hour one-on-one or one-on-team with a team science scholar. I'll be the first up for that. When you have, what we're going to do is share the feedback. When you share your feedback on how this session went, which is super helpful for us in deciding what we're going to do for future sessions, there'll also be an opportunity for you to sign up for these consulting sessions. And Gray just shared that a link to the feedback form in the chat, and I'm sure there'll be another link after this session. And that should be it. I think we're, at time. We're at 5 minutes left, so I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, or you can, just leave 5 minutes early. But thanks everyone for coming today. Happy to chat more, both now and offline. That's it. Thanks
Thank you
all.
so much.